Hello everyone, my name is Liu Yi. I'm from Jiangxi University of Finance and Economics. Welcome back to my class of International Macroeconomics. Today we're going to talk about international monetary experience. In this section, we will explore the international monetary experience. Our model shows as trade and other economic transactions between countries increases, the choice of fixed exchange rates will yield greater benefits. Thus, with the globalization of 19th century, more countries crossed the fixed line and met the economic criteria of fixing. There were also other forces led to gold peg before 1914. However, these benefits are often not as obvious as the costs, especially in times of deflation or recession. By the 1930s, world trade fell to nearly half of the 1914s, so the persuasion of fixing based on trade gains were weakened. Solutions to the trilemma before and after the World War I are as shown below. Each corner of the triangle presents a variable policy choice. The labels on two edges of the triangle are the goals can be achieved. The label on the opposite edge is the goals has to be sacrificed. To be specific, the top corner of the triangle represents the trade gains and absence of stability costs. This helps to explain how the gold standard came into being before 1914. Subsequently, reduced trade gains due to Great Depression and higher costs of civilization helped to explain the ultimate clasp of the gold standards in 1920s and 1930s. Countries sought new solutions to the trilemma to achieve policy autonomy, either by floating or by adopting capital controls. They lie at the right and the left bottom corner separately. To rebuild the order after the war, Harry Dexter White and John Maynard Keynes established a system maintained the key principle of gold standard, that was fixed rates. However, they abandoned the other by imposing capital controls. The resolution to this trilemma was helpful to exchange rate stability and encourage post-war trade reconstruction. Countries will peg to the central currency, dollar, and dollar pegged to the gold at a fixed price. This was the last remaining relic of gold standard. With the outbreak and end of World War II in the 1960s, the Bretton Woods system became unsustainable because capital mobility could not be contained. Countries came to the left bottom corner of the triangle. Thus, countries could no longer have fixed rates and monetary autonomy. The developed countries In the developed countries, the trilemma was resolved by shifting to float. The main advantage is preserving autonomy and allowing for the present era of capital mobility. In the triangle, it stands at the right bottom corner. The main exception was the currency union of the Eurozone. In developing countries and emerging markets, the fear of floating was stronger, because when capital markets were opened, monetary policy autonomy was often sacrificed and fixed exchange rates were maintained. This situation stands at the top corner, especially when the country is in a fixed but adjustable system. But increasing devaluation undermined the notion of a truly fixed rate system and made it more unstable. This inflation could also eventually conflict with the goal of fixing the dollar price of gold. So the US would eventually abandon its commitment to convert dollar into gold. And this situation did happen in August 1971. With the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, most advanced countries have opted to float and preserve monetary policy autonomy. A group of European countries decided to preserve a fixed exchange rate system among themselves. And some developing countries have maintained capital controls, but many of them, especially in the emerging markets, opt their capital markets. Noticeably, some developed and developing countries have compromised. They chose to maintain intermediate regimes, such as dirty flows or packed with limited flexibility. Finally, some countries still impose some capital controls instead of completely respond to globalization. To review this chapter, here we can have some discussion. First, can you describe the different ways in which the government intervenes the foreign exchange market and the floating exchange rate system? And do you know the current floating exchange rate adopted by China as well as its pros and cons? How about some tools taken by central bank to intervene in the foreign market? Another topic is many countries that experienced high inflation, even hyperinflation, will adopt to a fixed exchange rate system. In this case, what is the potential cost and benefits to fixing? The hint is you can discuss it combined with physical discipline, synergy, and expected future inflation. Here are some key points that can be mentioned throughout this chapter. Hope they can remind you of what we have talked about fixed and floating regimes. First, various exchange rate regimes have been operated from past to the present. Second, for the pegging countries, benefits for central countries include lower transaction costs and increased trade, investment, and migration. Third, for pegging countries, if they experience different economic shocks with central country, they should change those policies as soon as possible. Fourth, the net benefits of fixing can be summed up to a symmetric integration diagram. At high levels of symmetric and integration, in other words, if the country is above a fixed line, it can choose to fix, otherwise choose to float. Fifth, for high inflation countries, fixing may make it more credible. In addition, fixing prevents adverse wealth shocks caused by the depreciation in countries suffering currency crisis. Sixth, the trilemma and triangle can give us a better understanding of countries' choices of exchange rate regimes. When you cannot remember easily situation clearly, you can turn to the triangle. Let me show you how you can use it. Before 1914, the gold standard appeared and promoted integration, and political concerns for the losses of stabilization was limited. In the 1920s and 1930s, increased isolation, economic instability, and political disputes made the gold standard collapse. After the Second World War and up to the late 1960s, the Bretton Woods system of fixed dollar exchange rates seemed to be feasible. It contributed a lot to the recovery of trade after the World War, but with strict control on capital mobility. And it required that the US policies were not at odds with the rest of the world. Since 1973, groups of countries have gone their own ways and shifted to proper exchange rate regimes based on national conditions. At the end, let's go through the key words tightly related with fixed and floating regimes. Thank you for your attention. See you next class.